waiting on Keith, but you know what? Let's just go ahead and get started. I sent him a message. I think he'll join us shortly. But you know, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It is a holiday weekend.
It definitely is. All right, well, cool. We can get it kicked
So
off.
you know what? Let's. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
No, you're all set. I just the audio feed interrupted.
Okay. To everyone who's joining us today, we've made it to our 19th webinar. For everyone who's celebrating the holiday today, happy Memorial Day, and thank you for joining us today and taking the time out of the day to join us. We are jumping into promo today and all the intricacies around TV, radio, and appearances outside of the show. Yeah, so I'm gonna hand this over to Henry to kick this off and we'll get things rolling.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so if touring an album is like the sun to a garden, then promotion is like water. You have to sprinkle it in over time so the album can grow. Both are necessary to thrive, but too much of either will kill it. So today we're covering the promotional side of the job and how to manage TV performances, radio station visits, scheduling interviews, and knowing who to go to for the right information. Our special guest, Erika Spieldoch, head of touring and events for Interscope Records, and hopefully soon to join us, Keith McPhee, stage manager for The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and production manager for The Roots are here to help us get started. So, Erika?
By the way, that was a brilliant intro, Henry. Brilliant intro.
Came up with it 10 minutes ago.
That was brilliant. I love the sprinkling the water in the garden analogy of promo.
Well, you know what? It's so true. I wanted to make sure we
that was brilliant.
It's a very true statement, right?
Yeah.
Well, Erika, thanks for joining us. Let's get started with this. First, would you mind telling us about, for our students joining us, I want to first talk about the role of the record label and specifically yours when it comes to promoting a new album.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. Happy Memorial Day. Yeah, so I mean, the role of the label really is to, market and promote an artist's music. And specific to that, I run a department at Interscope Records that is in charge of really everything and anything that has to do with artists touring or performing live. A big component of what an artist does in their live performances, like you mentioned earlier, is performing at radio stations and on TV shows and special events and pop-ups and album release parties, you name it. And so, what we're there to do, the record label funds all that activity. We believe that those performances and those opportunities, are marketing drivers that expose the music to a wider audience. And so my role at the label really is to work with artists and managers, figuring out reasonable budgets for what those things ought to cost. We're also really intimately involved in coordinating all that activity. So we're sort of like the other hand of production management and day-to-day management in terms of making sure that those promotional opportunities, happen in a timely fashion, that, when the artist needs a certain amp, that it's there at the TV show, that they don't wake up morning of promotion and wonder who was running the gear, who booked the car. We make sure that that the T's are crossed, that the I's are dotted, so that those opportunities really go off smoothly and without a hitch.
Yeah, no, it's a huge part of it. Here, you know what? For our students that have been with us for a while, I wanted to just go back for a second and screen share. Do you guys see that?
Yep.
Episode 2, we talked about the touring family tree. And the top line of management for any artist, we're talking here today about this side here. That's a huge part of everything that we do. So we've covered a lot of these other parts, management and business management and so forth. But when it comes to the press and promo, appearances, record label, for some artists, it's a huge part of what we do on tour. And some artists are very selective about what they do. So would you say, is there any rhyme or reason to how much press an artist does? Do smaller artists do more press while bigger artists do less? How is it all chosen?
Yeah, absolutely. The amount of press you do and promo is really going to vary on, where you are in the trajectory of your career and the arc of an album cycle. As a developing artist, we are out there pitching for sort of any and every introductory opportunity to broaden awareness on who you are as an artist. So, you're going to be doing a lot of, you're going to be doing a lot of smaller press opportunities. You're going to maybe do local morning TV in Cincinnati, that sort of thing. It's really very early days. And so you're out there, I always sort of joke for developing artists that, really you ought to show up to a letter opening. This is the moment where, you take any opportunity to raise your visibility. Yeah. Things are very different, so promotion, at the start of whether it's just a single or an EP or an album, it's very, very heavy on the front end. That's where the work is being done to sort of, push it up the mountain, if you will. Once you have a hit, you're actually, it never really calms down, first you do the promo to get introduced, and then you have some success and you have a hit at streaming or a #1 song on Spotify and Apple. Well, now you're going to do more promotion because now the bigger outlets are very interested in you, and, Fallon and the Today Show and Good Morning America, those people are going to come calling. So now you've got to really, pour the gasoline on the fire to broaden your audience.
That's a good way to put it, because sometimes that fire does get stoked really quick, and an album really takes off from the start. And then, but then that's all you end up doing. But, I wanted to say that a lot of times when a tour manager starts with a job, it's starting with press. If we happen to be at the beginning of a touring cycle, you get hired with a new artist. A lot of the times, it's common for us to see a couple of weeks of just press and promo before we ever actually get to do the first show, first concert of the tour. We start there. So, so reaching out to the label is a huge part that I learned as I came up, that I needed to reach out to whoever was in charge of the record label as much as I needed to know who was in charge at the management company. It mattered so much because it was a different kind of show that we were doing there, right? Like it wasn't the tour concerts, it was press, promo, activities, and like anything extracurricular outside of the show sort of came from the record label, and there were different entities showing up every day interfacing with me. And so when I realized that you guys, that record labels and the promo reps and people like yourself were there to really help me through all of that stuff, because at first I didn't know how to manage it. I came up through this as a production manager, and so going into tour managing, I didn't understand that I had the ability to create that schedule that worked best for the artists, and that I was the go-to person in the crossroads to sort of make all that press and promo funnel into the tour, get done, and keep that tour train moving as well. And so it becomes very overwhelming. A lot of the times it comes at us very last minute. But when it came to that stuff, I found that it was a completely different budget. It wasn't coming out of the tour budget. And so can you talk to me about that and how budgeting works from the label to make these opportunities for the artists happen?
Sure. Well, we recognize, anything that an artist is asked to do by the record label promotionally that is going to cost more money than you're already spending to be out on tour, we consider those promotional costs. Those are things we're asking you to do. And we don't expect the artist to go out of pocket for that. And that's an investment in an artist's career as far as we're concerned. So those are marketing costs. They're not recoupable against artist royalties. And really for each opportunity, we recognize that if you are asked to go to a radio station and play an acoustic show, say 3 hours before your on stage time at the club, well, we recognize that you need a rent back line, and, you can't be in two places at once. So we'll pay for everything from, cars, the back line. If maybe you need to, say you've played a show in Chicago and there's a radio opportunity the next morning after your gig, well, we're going to pay to put you up that night in Chicago so that you can spend the night, do the morning radio visit, and then continue on with the tour. And same thing with, larger radio shows you might be asked to do, TV appearances. those things are going to cost money. If you're doing TV, especially if it's a female artist, there's going to be wardrobe and glam costs involved, to look right on national television. The artist may decide they want to hire, horns, strings, background singers, additional, accoutrements to really do a special performance. And so I'll work really closely with, the tour manager, the manager to budget out what that's going to cost and what's reasonable. What's reasonable varies depending on where you are in your career. When you're really, developing artists, the marketing budgets are very tight. It's early days versus what you might see if you were tour managing, Lana Del Rey or Lady Gaga or Selena Gomez. The numbers are significantly larger at that stage because you have a much larger crew. The glam becomes very, very expensive. And so, the cost and the expectation and what we consider reasonable, it really all depends on, where are you in the trajectory? How much money do you earn for the label? What sort of opportunity is this? An awards show, the Grammys, the AMAs, something like that. We're going to spend a significant amount of money. Those are going to be six-figure budgets because, those TV shows have global looks. And so you want the performance and the production to reflect that. So it's,
it's amazing, how much promo can come at an artist and that needs to get scheduled in. And so to our students, going back to the budgeting part, this is where you've already done the work. We've touched on episodes about budgeting, building the tour. You should already have grids that have the information that you can share with the record label of how many people, what their rates are, the things you're going to need, because you would have already touched in all of this stuff in your advance. And so you just kind of take the same information, but streamline it and send it to the label. But as I was saying about how it comes at you pretty fast sometimes in how much needs to get done. And we're also working on stuff weeks in advance. And so I remember coming up and it was tough to manage all of that at once. And so I realized that, if I could even just reach out to whoever the record label rep was, if I didn't have time to build you a whole budget spreadsheet, I could at least have a call with you and say, look, I know, I'll build this spreadsheet as soon as I can sit at my desk. We're on the move right now on a flight, but I know it's going to be 4 dancers, 3 crew. I'm going to need some backline and some flights for 2 people from the West Coast. Everybody else is local, and then it's boom, you already have the answers right there to take your team and put it together. And so that all of that shared, it was a 30-second phone call that would have activated the label support to kind of put in place what I was going to need once we got to that. You know what I mean? It saved a lot of time. So it's a big help using.
And the important thing about that really is because the budgets are so tightly scrutinized and, record labels are, it's not the 80s. I wish it were, but, I actually report to the CFO of the company because what we do is so budget heavy. And, every budget is scrutinized and it's, what's it going to cost? What's it going to cost? What's it going to cost?
Yeah. A lot of the times the press comes to a tour manager in the way of hey, the label's thinking about doing this idea. Can you make us a budget? Let us know how much it's going to cost. And it has to play tennis in that game back and forth for a minute before it ever gets approved. And
right.
So, the best I can do is just, here are the numbers of what I know it's going to cost. And it's up to you guys whether that the budget's going to be there or not. But this is the bare minimum it's going to take.
Exactly. And that's why it's really good to have an open relationship with your contact at a label, because I recognize, I have the artist, I've put together the artist master promotional schedule. So I know what you have on your plate. I know that you've had 3 shows in a row. I know that you have long drives. I know what is weighing you down, and I'm not going to be unrealistic and expect you to stop everything and do that budget when I know you're buried. So just that phone call of, hey, you've seen all my budgets for the past 6 months, so my payroll, roughly what it looks like. I will just extrapolate out. I'll do the budget for you, and when you got that good relationship, you can just say, I am absolutely slammed. I can't do it, but 4 dancers, 3 singers, and an elephant. And I'm I got it. And we'll put that together, and I'll even blast it back to you and say, yeah, it looks like it's about 25. Does this look about right? And you can quickly take a look and yeah, same page. And then we can decide if we're going to move forward with that opportunity, or if maybe, right now for what it is and for what the visibility is, it's a little too expensive. Maybe we'll wait till you're back in that city, but we can make decisions based on, real-time financial information. The goal is to maximize the marketing budget. The goal is not to do a small opportunity that's so expensive and so cost prohibitive that it eats up the majority of our promotional budget. We want to, you need to pick and choose your shots and do what's cost effective to maintain the marketing campaign.
Yeah, you have to as you get into promo, you start dealing with a lot of outside things that are outside of like a regular concert touring that we've spent nearly 2 months now covering, because you go into television, radio, and there's a lot of different terminology and also just a different flow of information in these worlds. And so I found that the best way for me to go about managing some of this stuff, because it's different worlds, but I know what I got to do to get this show on, but I had to lean on the label for things that I didn't know and be like, look, I just need to, I need to talk about production with whoever. So if you can just cut through the fat and connect me with the production person on whatever event is going on, I'll talk to them and we can get down to the nuts and bolts of like what I'm going to do to like get the show on. And so but also like not knowing what you don't know and relying on the label, because you must see so many newer artists that are coming in with new acts that have never been exposed to this. And so, for our students, it's important to realize that everybody that you work with know what it's like to be on tour and work with other artists. Because I asked you yesterday, how many people do you have on your team, and like how many artists did they all cover?
Okay, yeah. I have a 7-person team who works for me. A couple of the people on the team focus exclusively on tickets. We buy a huge volume of concert tickets. So that's one piece of what we do. But everyone really looks after a roster of about 20 to 25 artists. Not all of those artists are active at the same time. Just depends on what's on our release schedule for the year.
Crazy.
But yeah, it's
a lot.
We have over 100 artists on the roster at Interscope. It's a big company.
So obviously they know what they're doing. They know it better than you. They've done these shows, they've done the Tonight Show 1,000 times more than you have. And like those relationships are there. So speaking of which, Keith, thanks for joining us, sir. It's good to see you, brother.
So the next part we get to when you start the tour, pretty much one of the first conversations you're going to have with management or whoever you're starting to end with the artist is what you're doing for promo. There's not many tours, especially if you're working a record, unless you're just out there touring for the sake of touring. But if you're working a record or working new material, you're going to be doing promo. And the best thing to do is have that conversation early on as to what that means. What song are you working? What your options are for working that song? Will it be full band? I'll work with bands to say we can't compromise on this. We need to have the full band for this. But in a lot of cases, it'll be just the principal or the principal along with a guitar player. It's always different, but it's good to know in advance kind of what you're walking into in all those scenarios, what song you're doing, and put together a small rider that is the nuts and bolts of what you do for that specific show when you do it, whether it be TV or radio or in stores or whatever that may be that you're doing, that you have something set up. Why don't we bring Keith in, who is production for the Tonight Show? And Keith, what do you look for when you get a hospitality rider? A promo rider? What specifically are you looking for when you see that come into you?
I think the 3 most important parts are an input list, a stage plot, and backline needs. Those are the 3 basic things that we need from a production standpoint. And then you need a dressing room rider. Now, the dressing room rider also has to be chopped down completely because most shows don't provide any type of dressing room needs except for water and sometimes sodas and stuff like that. Different shows are different.
Mhm.
I'm also the production manager for the Roots, so we've done pretty much every promo show that's available. And some of them are great, have fruit and sandwiches and stuff like that, and some of them have absolutely nothing. You have to go out and get yourself. But from a production side, I need an accurate stage plot based on my design. So basically, what to do is the management will send me, or the tour manager, production manager will send me their stage plot. I will immediately reply and say, okay, can we work this into our 18-foot stage? Because our stage is only 18 feet wide at the proscenium and 22 upstage, so it's kind of an odd shape. We have to fit that in. And I need an accurate input list that reflects that song completely, just that one song. What do you need to do that song? Don't send me an input list that's 115 channels, because most shows don't have the ability to do that. And what's the point of doing 115 channels if you're only gonna play one song? Backline, the question is, do you want to, it's always easier for me to get backline, and I can get backline from various companies wherever you want, as well as vendors if necessary. And that's always that'll depend on where they are. If you're in LA and New York, you have no problem getting backline. If you're in another city, that may be an issue. You may want your own because you have no idea what their backline company and what their options are. But those are the three basic things that I need.
Great. Important note on the hospitality, as Keith said, you're not probably going to get there, but your artist might be somebody who has demands of specific things, or there's certain things. A lot of the shows will work with you. They have interns. They will run and get you what you need. It'll be on your dime, but at least there's the option of getting that in a lot of cases when you want. But you can expect that it's going to be bare bones. So let your promo person, let the show know if there's any specifics that you need. That's why it's important to have that promo rider, because you're going to get only what you ask for, and you might have to ask twice for a lot of things to get it, because you're going to just get what the show provides in a lot of these cases. They're not going to bend over backwards to get you what you want.
That's correct. I think a lot of it depends on the status of the artist itself. So if the artist is the Stones, we're going to get them whatever they want. If you're working with the basic new artist, you're going to get whatever they're going to give you, and that's we have to figure how it goes in between.
Yeah, Doug, do you want to touch base on unless anybody has anything on the rider? I think that covers it. On a promo package, what do to make it easier for you on the.
For sure, and Keith, you made a great point there about adapting your rider to the song you're going to be playing. You for the most part, you're going to be playing one or two songs. Your full rider may have, like you said, 125 inputs. You might only need half of those for the song that you're going to perform. And equally, what the Tonight Show can accommodate is not going to be the same as what local radio in Wisconsin can accommodate. That might be 6 channels, or it might be 1, or it might be 2. You have to, it's important getting out in front of these issues and advancing in good time so that you're prepared for what the studio can accommodate. Because if you turn up at a local radio station with your full setup and 50 channels, they're going to laugh you out of town because you got an hour and they've got 2 channels. So, it's very important that you realize that the spectrum of what you're going to encounter, even with an established artist, the spectrum of what radio stations for the most part can accommodate is really broad. So even with a big artist going into a smaller local radio station, they might only be able to accommodate an acoustic guitar and a vocal or some semblance of that. So it's important that you get out in front of that and advance in good time. And there are a different set of criteria and information that you need to get from your production contact at promo, and relay to your artist as well. Things like, is it live? Is it pre-taped? Is there an interview aspect? Who do they want for the interview? How many band members? Do they want to touch on a specific part of the artist's history? Is there something that is off limits? Can the artist swear? Can they not swear? All of these things which don't form for the most part, any basis in your regular show advance have to be factored in and communicated to your artists so that they know what they're walking into in advance. Because if you spring it on them as the interview is about to happen, as the promo is about to happen, first of all, they're going to be pissed. Secondly, they might not be as prepared for it and might make a mistake, might get something wrong, might swear live on BBC Radio 1, which is a no-no. So, you know, it's your responsibility to get with the production contact, get with the station, get with the TV show, and, you know, be as prepared as you can when you're walking your artist into a situation so that they don't you know, so that they don't make any issues. So, you know, Keith, how does that look from your side? How do you generally, what sort of time do you want to be hearing from the artist team? And is there anything outside of like what you said there that you really want to be passing along to them? You mentioned you send out.
The biggest thing for me is timing. I know that our agent that books the artist with the publicist, they usually find that out. And this is something that purely depends on the artist, but normally we get that information sometimes 2 or 3 months ahead of time. So it's important for the publicist on that side to get the information to the tour management so that they have that information. And that's why we need to get good timing. So I need to know, you know, a good head of time, what you're going to bring, what you need. I just noticed a question from Dan Michi that normally most shows have their own consoles, but there is a chance that they may not. And that's another thing that has to be resolved.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good question to point out, because it's good to know that a lot of times when we go to television, your normal engineers aren't mixing. Sometimes I'll send one, maybe two. It depends on what the show needs, because if we're not going to set up our own consoles, like I may just send one person, usually my front of house engineer, there to lend his ears to the booth, because you have some of the best studio engineers there mixing already. Like there's no need to bring in our engineers.
I mean, that's a huge issue. Some shows, I just note that our show we have touring guys who are on tour, who are touring sound guys, touring lighting guys. So we're sort of the odd show. I would have to say that the majority of the shows have studio guys who do studio, and that's it. Mm-hmm. So it helps for you to have your audio guy there to at least be in conjunction with that person who's actually doing the mixing, right, to determine what the sound sounds like. And then it also helps to have your front of house guy in the audio booth, not on the floor, not with the performance, to sit in the audio booth and say, oh, that sounds how we expect it to sound. And then I know in our show, we bring the artists up after the performance, we bring them up after the sound check, and they can sit and listen to the track that's been recorded, and they can make comments, and you know, and our audio guys really, really work with them to make it sound as normal as to what they normally expect.
Yeah, and that's an important thing actually. And I think if your team has an experienced engineer, he will know how to play that, because it's a delicate process going into somebody else's studio, his working environment, and not coming across like you're telling him what to do. But if you're with a new artist and you're with a new front of house, he's got to walk on eggshells in that situation. If he walks in there all guns blazing, telling this 40-year vet who's one of the best in the game how to mix his mix, he's going to get told to politely be quiet. There is a method of advising and you know, giving information where it's asked for, that when it works harmoniously, it's great. Mm-hmm. But when it doesn't, it can cause friction between the touring engineer and the house engineer, as in every situation on tour. So, you know, if you're with a newbie sound engineer, it's a good practice to give him a pep talk, just explain what he's walking into, and that the guy sitting behind the desk is probably way more senior than he is, and probably knows a lot more than he does, and just to kind of respect that dynamic a little bit.
You know, it's unfortunate, but there are
So, you know,
I'm sorry, there are definitely bands that as soon as they're booked, we're like, oh shit, you know, because we know what to expect, because sometimes they have audio guys, lighting guys, scenic guys that are really a pain in the ass, and that comes with the business, you know. So we just know how to deal with them. But just for those people out there that are coming in, it's important to have a good relationship with the show and have a good relationship with those audio guys and visual guys, and especially the lighting guys. I don't think anybody talks about the lighting guys, but you know, they do 5 shows a week, 200 shows a year plus, you know, and you're just one segment of a television show, or you're just one segment of a radio show, and they have to do 5 other segments. So they're not really 100% focused on what you want or expect. So that helps sometimes to say, hey, can we do this? Is this possible? The best way to do it is to express it as a question. Don't say, we want, you know, it has to be this, it has to be that, you know, get in there. And it helps to be in person. That's why I think it's important for you to bring your lighting guy and your audio guys to be able to sit with them and say, you know, we'd like possibly to get a little bit more sub out of this kick, or we'd like a little bit more lighting to come from the front rather than the back. You know what I mean? Just things like that are important, but it all depends on how you approach the individual from the show. And I'll tell you, a lot of shows they don't want to hear anybody. You know what I mean? And we are, I think we are the odd show out with the level of involvement that we allow from lighting people, set people, audio people. I know that a lot of shows, you know, I've done most of them, and a lot of the guys are guys that have been there for 20 years. They don't want to hear what you have to say, you know, and a lot of it becomes in a relationship. You have to finesse them, you know, and that's important to know how to finesse people. And a lot of bands that come out that are new don't have a clue. And the best thing sometimes is just to keep your mouth shut and see how it goes. And then if it becomes an issue later, you know, while in the course of the setup, you say, you know, talk to the lighting guy, say, hey, you know, is there a possibility we can get, you know, more front wash on the lead singer and not on these people that are the guests, that are some of these. And the other thing is that sometimes the people that are doing the stuff for the show don't realize that maybe one of the guys is really the important guy, is the main guy of the band, and the rest of them are just a support act. And I try to find that out before we even start, so I can let my audio or lighting guys know that this is a band has a name, but the real lead singer, like specifically Panic at the Disco, is really one person. You know what I mean? And it's not a whole band. And the focus should be on that one person. And sometimes the lighting guys know, and our lighting guy is pretty on top of it. So he listens to the band ahead of time and watches videos ahead of time. But not all shows are like that. And you have to be aware that not all shows are the same way we are.
That's a good point out. There are shows where, like, I want to point out as well that there are some shows that I've loved doing because there's just great crew that just loved their job. That, like, I miss Letterman in that way, that because used to go and I remember the crew guys, you know, and it was a tough gig to do Letterman because you had to kind of go in and like move your gear around 2 or 3 times to accommodate their shoot rehearsal.
And it was freezing.
And it was always freezing, but you know what? Like, you go in there first thing in the morning, and although it's freezing, there was always hot coffee, and the crew was always like, "Welcome to the Ed Sullivan Theater, guys. Like, looking forward to having you. You know, we're gonna have a great day." And so it was a good time. And you know, but what you're saying is like all in the advance, right? And there's a different kind of a dance we do in the advance for TV shows, because say, like, you know, if it's my first time doing the Tonight Show, you know, before I can, there's an element of creative that comes into play that we're going to get more into when you do television. But with the show there, I need to figure out what I can do there. What are the parameters, the timings, stage dimensions? Like, there's the hard factual information of, you know, stage plot, input list. But then when creative comes into play, I kind of need to figure out what I can do, and then hopefully steer whoever my creative entity is with an artist, whether it's the artist himself or herself, a designer, or management telling them they can do all this stuff, or their friends. Like, I have to try to steer that creative conversation into the right way. So So you and I tend to go through back and forth with this advance, like, hey, we're thinking about bringing in this huge video wall and special effects. Can we do this? And then my artist may think about that for a couple days, and I have to wait for you to come back and say yes or no. And then we got to get a budget, and then they cancel that idea. And then now we want a flying pink pony to come over the crowd. It's like and then the advance can take so long when it comes to television that it just must rack your brain constantly to like go through all this stuff that people want to try to do on TV. Like, can you tell me what that's like?
Well, it's a little nutty because some bands who have done the show numerous times are very timely with the information because they understand the nature of television, that it takes time for us to do anything. Yeah. Nothing can be done day of. It takes time, and the issue is a lot of it costs a lot of money because it's television. So all that stuff has to be funneled back through the label and through the artist management. A lot of times I get information from a production manager saying, we just want to bring the band in and we'll do it like that and we're great. And then 2 weeks later, I get a call from some set designer person who says, hey, we've got the set we want to bring in, and we want to know what size it is, and we have it built already, which is another issue. So the issue is trying to juggle all of those things in a timely manner. I think one of the major issues is getting information too late and to the point where we can't do anything. And that's the issue that artist management and art and touring managers should know, that just be timely with the information, just because it becomes an issue later on.
Sometimes we do the best we can, man. Sometimes I just don't have an answer to the last minute, and we're gonna pull this off, bro. But like, it's
and then we have limits. Like I say, a lot of the issue comes with the stature of the artist. If Lady Gaga says, I want to bring a clear piano and put it on the top of a riser 10 feet in the air and have haze and blue light, and I'm going to do it in a white dress, guaranteed it's going to happen. And we've done that before within 24 hours, and we've had the crew there all day and night, and that happens. And the other thing is that pretty much, from a show standpoint, just from our show, we could do pretty much anything, you know what I mean, within the size and scope of our room. It all just has to be planned and organized. And the other issue is who's paying for it. I don't know if we've gone through that part yet of who's paying for.
It's always in conversation.
I was just going to say that we got to that part. We'll get back to that part. We'll revisit that part, and then we'll close with that part.
Yeah.
And because as things develop in the genesis of all this kind of stuff, there's always the surprise party, because as we know, this business is a surprise party every day anyway. So you have to kind of be ready for that. And then the first question is always, well, who's paying for that?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little bit of everybody.
Right.
We kind of the label, there's certain costs that the show can take on, and then sometimes the artist just is okay or unwillingly does have to come out of pocket sometimes to get the gag or the look that they want.
Yeah. We definitely have artists that have paid for performances out of their pocket because the label doesn't have the money to pay for it because their promo budget is almost done. It depends on where your performance comes in the promo cycle. You know what I mean? If you're performing at the beginning of your promo cycle, your chances of getting that bigger budget are probably a little bit easier than getting it at the end of your promo cycle. And Erika, probably, I don't know if she spoke to the point already, what's important? Is it important for the record at 3 months down the road after the record's already out to do this $100,000 performance?
Yeah. Is it actually going to move the needle? Like you performed that one single for the last 3 months, spending
it's number one at radio. Yeah. And
you may not need to, but so you're right. And so typically the budget sort of goes up. So understand that the label is thinking about that in mind, that like, look, if this bit works, then we get to bring this home and you'll get a 6-figure budget for the Grammys if we take this all the way to the bank, like it goes that way. They're smart about the way they do it, but but taking it back to the advance, say we finally finalized our idea and the creative of what we're going to do. I mean, it's particularly with your show, there's more of a logistical advance that comes into play with this. And there's so many of our listeners that like the Tonight Show sometimes is like one of the first shows they end up doing, first television show they ever do. And so, say you've gotten this far, you still got to work to navigate your way through the docks there. But like your show is right. Talk to me about the logistical side of your show.
Well, our show is underground. Our loading dock is underground, and that's the big issue in the building. So we can't bring trucks in. We can't bring 18-wheelers in. We can bring 24-foot box trucks, and that's it. I can't bring buses with trailers. So all of those things have to be resolved, preferably way ahead of time. I have trucks from SIR that can come to New Jersey to pick them up in a parking lot at Walmart, and which we normally cover. And that's the other thing, who's covering what. So that's one of the things we'll cover, and that's important. So the schedule of the day, do you want me to go through the schedule? Is that?
Well, yeah, because, like a lot of times on tour, I have to try to fit in your show before a show somewhere else in the city that night. And so it becomes like a very advanced level of logistics and moving crew and gear around very fast. And so thinking ahead and communicating with you can really save me a lot of headaches. Knowing that you can send a truck out to my bus that's parked in Secaucus, or I can just bring my guitars, but I can get the other basic stuff from SIR from you. Like these are things that we've touched on in previous episodes that I think our students are starting to see, that like you're taking all these skills that you learned and you're putting them into practice while you're moving a tour around. And it gets crazy, but you have to use people like Keith and Erika to get through these things. Cause this is what you signed up for.
And sometimes this stuff does come out of the woodwork. You might you might have everything in place, and then suddenly an opportunity for some promo comes up and it's inserted in a day off, or, somehow you find yourself having to make a detour, and maybe you take your, what we call the fly party or the one-off party, which is your scaled down skeleton crew, and you grabbed your artist and, maybe the core team. Like I used to call the Black Keys fly team the Magnificent Seven, because it was the same gang that would just run off and do those promo runs like a hit and run. So you kind of have to have in the back of your mind, if you're even somewhat in a promo cycle or you're supporting a new record on your tour, that in the back of your mind, that thing that's a day off, that's a pending non-show day. Because you just don't know when things like that. I mean, and we've had literal radio festivals on the other side of the country pop in on a show day on the East Coast, and we're like, whoa, okay. Then you have to figure out how you're going to logistically do that. And that's kind of an all hands on deck situation. And if you're trying to do that in the middle of a show, you have to be able to get back to your show and leave enough people on the ground to set that show up, so that when you come screaming in hot at whatever time in the afternoon with some of your core people and potentially some of your most elemental crew that might have needed to also be there during the day to set up, that's when everybody really needs to be putting the team in teamwork. Yeah.
I love that part of the job, honestly, when it's like that and everybody pulls together. It's amazing what we can accomplish, like
when we pull off the impossible.
Yeah.
Oh, hell yes.
We do
hell yes.
Yeah. Incredible. And sometimes it always seems to be right around New York,
Yeah. It's really funny. I think that in New York specifically, a lot of the people that get on our show, I would say the top tier artists, those top tier artists are split between those that are booked previously months out, and those that just say, oh, we have an opening. Why don't we come to your show? And that becomes an issue when it's that top tier artist that says, oh yeah, sure, we'll come and do the Tonight Show on next week, and that's when we start scrambling at our show, getting all those things together. And that's it's always a little crazy, but it's always good when it's an artist that's
it's fun when we have the right team to put that together, you know, because everybody knows the drill. You know, they've been to that show, they know logistics, and it's amazing what we can pull off. But you know, like, I want to make sure we point out that there's an etiquette to all of this that's a little different from touring, because sometimes we're a bunch of rough and tough roadies that push our way through towns, but there's a different protocol and etiquette that comes to showing up at NBC or any radio station. Can you guys touch on that for a second for our students?
So I think that the one thing we're speaking about timeliness, our show, we start our production setup at usually 8:45 in the morning. And the key is to be on time or early. Early is always better. I hate getting to the studio, walking in my studio and seeing no backline, nobody from the crew, you know, and I start sweating at that point, but I'm there 45 minutes early. So when it gets to 15 minutes, I'd like to see the band there, or, you know, whoever's going to be there from production, the production people there. And that's important. Timeliness is important. Yeah. And I say that when I was late for this call, but you know, I apologize. But that's important. Being timely, getting your gear there. And the other thing is, how is your gear getting to the building? If you're bringing it day of, there's a whole thing that has to be involved with getting into the basement of our building. Like I said, if you have a truck that comes from Jersey, you know, it's normally one of my trucks or one of my companies that I'm associated with. So getting them in the building is pretty easy. If it's your truck, and sometimes we have bands that say, we're gonna do a show in Brooklyn the night before, and we'll have our truck that'll park in Brooklyn the night before, and then it'll drive us in, or it'll come pick us up from wherever and bring it into the city. So the issue becomes that the building that I work at is not owned by NBC, it's owned by another company. The loading dock is operated by another company, even though a great number of the trucks that go in there are for NBC. That still involved a whole area of buildings that use the same dock. Timeliness, I have to get the information from the truck driver, the truck name, the license plate number, the truck, the make, model, all that type of stuff has to come to me with sufficient time to get it in the basement so it's ready to go by the time it needs to load it. Now, our load-in is normally an hour before our setup upstairs because of the fact that it is a big building and there's so many things coming in that your truck might not be able to get loaded to the dock after it sits there for a half an hour. Earlier is always better. So once it gets into the building, my crew brings it upstairs, and then we start working normally 8:15, 8:45. Depending on this show schedule. Now, the other important thing is that our show is limited in the amount of time we have for music. We have a whole show we have to do. We have 5 other acts that have to be rehearsed besides music. Music gets a large portion of the day because of the fact that it changes every day. We have normally about 3 hours. So we have 8:45 to normally 12 o'clock. That's realistic. We have a little bit extra, but we try not to use it because we have to move. And unfortunately for us, and this is not the same with some television shows, we have to move everything off the stage when we're done because we have to do the other show. We have to do the show, we have to do the intro and everything, and then we have to bring it out for the performance segment. So that's another thing to be aware of, that everything has to move.
Yeah. So to point out that, like, that's different. That's a different kind of schedule that you're managing, because you know, usually if we go to the venue, you set it and forget it, and you have all day. You know, I've got 8 hours versus 3. Yeah. You have a different schedule of logistics that you know, I remember at Letterman, you used to have to come back and like move your gear around like 3 times for their shoot, and so the crew had to stay on all day, although they weren't doing anything other than having to move the gear forward or backward for the TV shoot. So, you know, it's a different type of day, and being aware of those differences is a huge thing that helps everyone's day go smooth. But you're right, that's a good thing to know.
It also goes without saying that, you know, if you're going live and you have an artist who is not the most timely, you need to be on his or her ass, because you know, you can't fuck around with live TV. If it's
That's
live,
true.
it's live. You got to be, you know, to the second accurate. So, you know,
Yeah.
that's where it really differs from doing your own show you know, at times.
That's true. I was gonna my last point that I wanted to make about etiquette. I wanted Erika's input on it because as a tour manager, we are the face that and the person that represents the artist and the management company and the record label. And a lot of the times, like there's an etiquette and professionalism that has to come with being a tour manager in speaking to these outlets. Erika, do you have anything to say about that?
Absolutely. It's so important. And especially early days, you know, sometimes you might be a tour managing a new act, but the act is taking off very fast and they, you know, they have all kinds of heat and all kinds of buzz and it's off like a rocket ship. And that doesn't mean that it's okay to walk in places like you own the joint and to throw around ego and attitude just because your artist is successful all of a sudden. Because the people that you see on the way up are the people that you are going to see on the way down. And statistically speaking, there will be a way down. Not everyone gets to have a career like the Rolling Stones. And you're going to be in different places in your career. So it's really important to remember that it's a small industry. Everyone knows each other. And, you know, I mean, it's just basic human manners. You know, you're being given this great opportunity to expose the artist and to develop their career. And, you know, as a developing artist, you know, to be, you know, humble and grateful for those opportunities and represent the label and management and in a way that they would be proud. You know, because a bad tour manager or, you know, a bad apple in the batch can really leave a bad taste in people's mouth, and that gets around, you know. And
Absolutely.
you know, Keith knows all of his counterparts at all the other TV shows, and all the radio people know each other. And if word starts getting around that the tour guy is a dick or the audio guy is a dick or whatever, it's not not good.
It's a small world.
You into other jobs and into other opportunities, and it's just, I mean, I give that advice to anyone professionally, regardless of what you do. So,
Yeah.
you know, and it also reflects on how hard people want to work for you. You know, if you show up at Keith's show and you're really humble and nice, and then at the last minute, the artist wants some crazy creative change, well, because you've been so lovely and thankful, they're going to do it. They're going to bend over backwards to do a favor for you.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
likewise, if the artist wants an expensive set piece and they have been always helpful and nice and collaborative with me, the label, I'm more inclined to approve a bigger budget and let things slide and not always torture you about a budget down to the dollar, because I know you're working hard and I know you're a team player. So
Yeah, same goes when it's like when we're going to a radio station. Just being nice to everybody there. I mean, like if like we all have the greatest of intentions for every artist that we work for. We want them to get bigger. So don't you want to be a nice, friendly face to everybody that you meet that wants to like say something nice or promote your band? Like, yeah. So like at the radio station, like just be like, yeah, I work for the artist. I'm, you know, but I'm here to help however I can. But like know your place. Don't be like, you know, talking about stuff or just being loud and obnoxious like in the studio when you're not supposed to be. Like understand that like you have to keep a professional demeanor and just be a lot of times, you know, in film, in radio and TV, there's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of downtime that you just wait in hallways or a green room somewhere, and that's the real truth about it. And so, but when it's your time to put in your piece of the puzzle, because you're just one little puzzle for that show that day, like just do that as best as you can, and then like get out. You know, it's all about the out.
I think one of the other things is that as a tour manager, you hire your crew, you know, a lot of times based on information you have from other people. And word gets around when your audio guy is a pain in the ass, or, you know, when your lighting guy can be really, really difficult to work with. And you have to take that into consideration when you're hiring those people, that who is the person who's going to be best for my artist, and who's going to present themselves the best way. So I don't know the demographics of your audience. I'm assuming it's probably mostly tour managers and things like that, but that's one thing they should be aware of when they're hiring audio guys and lighting guys and sound guys and, you know, production guys. And the other thing is, I know at our show, we have certain production companies that are outside of the normal touring people. Like if you have a set company, a set design, that's designed by a specific company. We have some companies we don't like to deal with because people come in and they try to take over the show and they speak very, I don't know, what's the word? I can't think of the word, but anyway, but they're assholes. Let's put it that
Condescending, condescending.
Trying to be nice.
They're
We're
condescending.
all in the music business, so you can say.
Yeah, but that's important, and just realize that whatever you do, whoever you present yourself represents the artist. So whenever that artist comes back, we're like, oh shit, we're gonna have to deal with this guy. You know, we're gonna have to deal with this guy. And the best thing is when artists realize that and they get rid of those people, we're always like,
Yeah.
great move. But I can't be the one to tell that artist that person is an ass. But as a tour manager, you have to be aware of everybody that's part of your team and find out whether they're working for the good of your artist or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And one way that you can assist your crew and your team in, you know, being nice is to communicate really clearly with them how the day is going to go. Because especially when you're new to doing promo and your team's new to doing promo, it can be really confusing. You're in this like studio. For example, if you're in Keith's building, there's different studios on different floors, and you know, you're like, what do I do? So, you know, I think the more detailed that you can be with them about how it's going to run, the importance of being on time for their calls, and communicate exactly how it's going to go. You know, you're going to help your team to be able to look good and understand what's going to go on and understand the big picture of the day. And, you know, like we said, there's a lot of downtime when doing promo. Like almost always, especially when you're doing TV, you have to load in really, really early morning, and then you do rehearsal, and then sometimes you don't have a call back until like 4 or 5 hours later. And it's really good on your side, decide what you're going to do, have a plan. Sometimes going back to the hotel isn't the best option. You know, like in New York, it might take you an hour if you're staying downtown and you're, you know, in Midtown. So it's like, you know, what are you going to do? Sometimes this can inform how you're going to book your hotels for this. You know, maybe you book a hotel around the corner that's a little more expensive, but you don't have any transportation costs for the crew, and they could just roll back. So those are the kind of things to think about. You know, communicate with your team, put together your logistics to make that downtime, you know, good for everybody, and so that there's no surprises. You know, and I'm actually gonna, if I can screen share here, Henry.
Turn it on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay. I'm gonna show you quickly a day sheet. This band, this was sort of a mid-level band doing just a promo run, and this day was completely promo at Seth Meyers, and they used Master Tour, but they like to have a PDF just to look at on their phones. And I'm gonna just do the screen sharing. And so this is what you can expect, just a very, even as a smaller band, like your day to look like. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
So, you know, I laid it completely out for all the different teams. Crew lobby call, 9:15. And this was everything that they did through the day. And I just spelled it out. Lots of stuff to do around there, even down to, you know, they like to do their pre-show ritual. And I had to tell them, like, you need to do the fist pumps before 7:15. You know, you need to walk right on stage. So it's really helpful to be very communicative with your party about every little thing. And I'm sure that helps Keith when people know what to do and the crew isn't just wandering around.
I mean, the other thing is, just ask me if you have any concerns prior to getting into the building. Just ask me or Elena, who's our artist rep, to say, hey, you know, what do we do during this time? What are we doing during this time? And
Yeah.
can you recommend some hotels around the corner, or, you know, things like that? We're always happy to give that.
You asked nicely. Keith will give you his elevator pass, and you can just go up and down every floor. Go to go
to
see
the top of the rock.
Yeah. And a lot of places have.
Elaine is always great about getting me in office. Like Elaine is always like,
Yeah.
well, no, you only get so many rooms, but then every time I've been to the Tonight Show, it's like Elena gets me in office for myself to lock the door, and I can work while everybody else is off roaming the city. So if you develop that relationships, you know, we've done it enough times, and Elaine and I talk when I'm not doing the show, you know, and we've developed those relationships. And when I go in there, I know I'm going to be taken care of. I know that I'm going to get what I need above and beyond if I need it, you know?
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. It's interesting, just from our standpoint. I'm also the production manager for The Roots. So I've done just about every television show you can think of. And I know what I like, and I know what I hated about other shows. So we've tried, you know, with all our might to make our show the best environment that you can come to. And that's important, because you know what you don't like, you know what drives you nuts, you know what information you need to know. And that always, I think that's helped. And that's we're sort of the odd show out, where most of our production guys are all touring guys as well. So they understand going on the road with the band. My front of house guy, and unfortunately, or fortunately, most of the guys work for The Roots. My front of house engineer is The Roots front of house engineer. My monitor engineer is The Roots monitor engineer. So they know what it's like to do tons of shows and do promo as well as doing shows at the same time.
And sometimes it's helpful.
Sorry, go ahead. MJ.
Oh, as I say, sometimes it's helpful. Something we talked about yesterday is that sometimes you will have a show where there's nothing around there. And it's good to plan for that. Like Jim and I were talking about, if you do Jules Holland in the UK, the studio it's at now is in Maidstone, Kent, which is 2 hours away from London. And it is literally just alone. But luckily they have nice catering and good dressing rooms. So it's like, you know, you can plan for that. You can just let your crew know, hey, this is, you know, that downtime, they have great internet. This might be a good time to call home, you know, or work on that stuff that you need to work on, you know, so that there are no surprises. So you may have those as well, but as long as you have that relationship and you're communicating it in your advance, you can come up with plans, you know. Those places usually, those kind of shows are usually well aware that they don't have a lot around them. And if you have a good relationship with them, they'll help you. They'll run and get something, or, you know, have stuff waiting for you. Might be at your cost, but they'll do it, you know, in advance. So, and anyway, go on, Doug.
Whatever it takes to get through the day and on to the next show, right? Like,
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm not sure if you guys can hear me. My internet is kind of playing up again, but I just wanted to make two really quick points there regarding schedule. First of all, if your crew are expected to be on a certain type of promo, be upfront with them when they come on board, when you hire them, or before the tour goes out. If your front of house is going to be required for all promo, tell him in advance, so he's aware that maybe if he might have a day off that might turn into a promo day, because if that day off disappears on him, he's not going to be too happy. And secondly, you know, if you have two day schedules running concurrently, you have a show day schedule in Master Tour, but you also have part of your team off site at promo. Find a way that delineates the two so that it's not confusing for everyone. Whatever way it is, for me, I like to write all my promo line items with promo in caps before it and then load in, so that I don't have two load ins, people aren't confused. But just find a way that delineates the two. If you have artists off site, or if you have part of your crew off site, find a way that on your schedule makes sense, so that it's easy for those that are looking at it who maybe aren't with you at promo.
A good way to go about that is what I do is just, you can set up two schedules for the same day, and you just have certain team locked in on your promo schedule and can see your main primary show if you are doing two shows that day, which are two different shows that day, so that way your team doesn't get confused. Just to add what Doug was saying there.
One of the things that we spoke about yesterday with Erika and Keith was how the tour manager and our production manager is the advocate for the artist on the road. And Erika, I wanted to ask you, because you touched on a good point yesterday, of some of the things with communication between the label, the tour manager, the artist, and then going on down to Keith. What are some of the things that you kind of have seen with tour managers who are just starting or well-established tour managers that kind of make them a little bit more aware of the do's and don'ts of dealing with promo?
Sure. I mean, when we first sign an artist at Interscope and when they get to a place where they're going to start getting active, I and everyone on my team, we make it our business to have a call with the tour manager, you know, and the manager, and we really talk about how we're going to communicate and what is going to work and what works for them. You know, it might be a brand new artist who's never done any promo, in which case, you know, we're there as a resource to help them. You know, I put together really comprehensive promo schedules that look like what Mary Jo just showed the group, you know, except they'll be 9, 10, 12 pages long. And it's everything that's going to happen on a promo tour or a tour. You know, because oftentimes a new tour manager, you know, if the tour manager is a friend or they just, you know, the artist has only played clubs locally, they've never gone out and done it on a larger scale. And so in that case, I am a resource to them to almost sort of show them the way. And I give them promotional schedules so that they know from like the minute they wake up the next day to the minute they sound check exactly what, you know, the label has cooked up for the artist so that it's not a surprise. They, you know, so that's, you know, in the case that there's an inexperienced tour manager or someone who hasn't traveled nationally yet. If it's an artist who, you know, maybe they, you know, they can afford a tour manager who has been around the block several times, in which case it's about communication. And I'll say to them, you know, how do you like the schedule? Do you want, you know, if it's super busy, sometimes I will send them a day sheet, you know, before I leave the office the night before, just so they can take it in small bites. Because sometimes what's happening is so overwhelming and so much of what's flying at you, you do not have the mental bandwidth to look at a 9-page schedule. We just got to get through tomorrow. And so I'll remind and I'll say, here's your day sheet for tomorrow of all the promo. And they really like that because it helps just keep them focused on what's right ahead of them. So it's, you know, it's really about just open communication of what works, what do you need? Some tour managers are very buttoned up. Some are dealing with artists who are absolutely insane and they're having to be a psychiatrist and they're just lucky to get the person out of the hotel room in the morning and then they cannot possibly think of the promo. And so if I know that, if I know what you're dealing with, then I can be more helpful to you, because at the end of the day, my being helpful to you is going to be helpful to Interscope. You know, I need to make sure that you show up at the Tonight Show on time and that it wasn't, oh God, we're late because the singer was crazy and wouldn't come out of the hotel room. So, you know, we're there to be a resource and help. So just really open communication and, you know, raising your hand on what you need, raising your hand if you're overwhelmed, if you need the information in a different fashion. You know, there can never be too much communication because it just helps keep everything.
So I have one more thing I'd like to relay. As tour managers and production managers, and I know that we've covered this already about relationships and communication, can you just also, and I would direct this to you also, Keith, just kind of give a little bit of wisdom and knowledge. Not only don't be an asshole, you know, when you come into our shows, don't be an asshole to the promoter rep when you've met them for the first time, you know, when they show up to a show. Can you guys share a few words of wisdom to our viewers of what would be some of the things that they should be aware of other than not being complete assholes with dealing with like the Tonight Show or dealing with the at the label?
Well,
I'll go with you first, Keith.
Okay, from my side, I think it's important for them to know that a lot of what happens on the show is, I guess, predetermined at some point. There's not a lot of, unfortunately, there's not a lot of creativity that happens day of. Do you know what I mean? Because everything that has to happen weeks in advance, or, you know, hopefully, to make it happen. Do you know what I mean? Because the show is, we do, like I say, we do 5 shows a week. We do 6 acts a day, you know, so it's a machine for us. And you are just jumping into the machine. So it's important to have as much prior knowledge and as much prior planning as possible. I think I can't express that enough, that prior knowledge is all important for us.
But I mean, as far as a tour manager or production manager dealing with you, you don't want them coming in with a heavy hammer.
No, but I like to know, I like a production manager, a tour manager to know what, unfortunately, to know what they're doing. Meaning, I don't like to have to tell them, hey, can you get your guys down here to the studio? Where's your front of house guy? Or, I just think I need them to, in that environment, to be the babysitter. Because crew guys are, they're crew guys. Some guys, backline techs, walk off and go to the bathroom or decide to go to the cafeteria, you know what I mean? And that's the issue. So, you have to be on top of all those people. Now, you wouldn't necessarily do that at the day-to-day on a show, but because of the fact that our time schedule is so tight, that everybody has to be present and accounted for. And that's, for me, is the most important thing, for them to have good people management skills of knowing where their guys are, knowing, when they need to be back and all those types of things. And if you don't know, please ask. That's the other thing. The other thing I have a problem with, and this is not a problem in Erika's case, is that our show sends a schedule out to the publicist. That's our relationship. The booker books an act through a publicist. They don't book them through tour management. They don't book them through a management company. They book them through the publicist. So all of our information initially goes to the publicist, and then that publicist funnels it down. And unfortunately, what happens is some publicists don't send the information, or they send the information really late, or they send the information to the management office, and the management forgets. Do you know what I mean? So I think the important thing for tour managers to be is to be involved with their publicists and say, hey, do we have any promo coming up? Like, I mean, I can't express that enough, that the timing that I get this information is all important when it comes to having your artist have the best possible performance. If I know the stuff far enough in advance, we can discuss what has to happen and what can happen and what can't happen. That way you don't have to go back to your artist and say, we can't do this because we don't have time to do that, or it's going to cost $100,000. You know what I mean? That's the most important thing for me, is just that good relationship. And Erika's not the issue, but I have a lot of issues with publicists, and a lot of times it's not, and I don't think it's necessary with the major labels. A lot of bands come up, they have their own management companies, and they're on independent labels. And unfortunately, because of the nature of the music business now, you could become a star on internet, and you have no publicist. You don't have, or you may have a publicist who hasn't done this stuff before. And unfortunately, I think a lot of those artists aren't even involved with the people that are on this call, because they don't have tour management. They don't have anything. And that becomes frustrating for me to get information, 3 days out and say, hey, this is what we want to do. And it can't necessarily happen.
Well, Erika, before I have you answer the question, I just kind of want to backtrack for a second. So I know, Keith, you said about where's the guitar tech, or where's this. One of the things I found when I do those shows, because you have enough on your plate during the day, so trying to keep tabs on people, and we don't have radios, when we're doing these TV shows. So one of the things that I have found that I've done, and I've kind of learned this from Henry actually, is when we're at some of these TV shows, don't make that face, Henry. When we're at some of these TV shows, I use, the group text or WhatsApp, to kind of text everyone, hey guys, you need to be down here in 5 minutes, so everyone knows, because you're not going to get on there and call like 9 different people, hey, where are you at? So that's just one little trick that I learned from Henry years ago, is just do a group chat to everyone, because that way you're kind of keeping tabs. You are the babysitter. So, just small things that kind of make your life easier, to make Keith's life easier, and then also Erika's life a lot easier when she's on site with you all.
You know what, like, honestly, like the group chat thing, I take it not just between my crew, but like if I'm going to do the Tonight Show, I'm going to have a group chat between like my crew, but I'm also going to have a side chat going on with Erika and Keith. So the label and the show know my artist is 10 minutes away. I only have to send one text, and then everybody that needs to know knows what's going on. So we're all at the same page. It's nothing more than just like, boom, okay, yep, they're on it. He's on the way. She's on the way. Yep, we're doing good. Or, you know, anything like that. Like, we have yourself.
Agreed,
Like,
Henry. I have a band thread. I have a band thread, a dancer thread, a singer thread. And in my world, I'm giving
driver threads,
production thread, and in my world, I'm giving people 15-minute notices from an hour prior because I have 20 people on stage with my principal. So, and they're kittens on fire everywhere. I can and if I'm constantly doing a lap, knock, 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 40, knock, 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 30, or now I have to chase one down, but then the other 20 are still waiting for the knock, knock, I start to give them the time increments on the chat, and I'm in their faces because inevitably somebody's missing their mark. And when there are 20 fiery kittens running around, you just can't,
A great habit to get into right when you're kicking off the tour is just know who your key people are and who you need to be communicating with the most. You start a WhatsApp group with your, you know, Erika, your Interscope, your management, your crew, people, your artists. I think we said in our advancing webinar, one of our webinars back, just communication is such an essential part of how we do our job, and getting in a habit of doing that when you're kicking off the tour is going to save you a lot of time and headache, and help your logistics.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about, one of the things about Q, which we haven't discussed yet, and that is, a lot of these places these are some of the coolest places we're going to get to go to on touring. You know, it's have fun with the days. They're hard work. They're not always the most fun. They're logistically, there can be a nightmare, but having been, you know, getting to do Saturday Night Live, getting to do the Tonight Show, getting to do like even the varying degrees, like all the way back to Leno, and having done the Tonight Show with him, Conan, Letterman, all these, you know, these things are some of the coolest stories, the coolest experiences you're going to have. An important thing to do too is that you also need to be able to fly by the seat of your pants in these situations. You can advance these things like crazy. I have a story that I was with a band. There was towards the end of Letterman saying they didn't want to do just the normal Letterman thing, so they said, let's build a stage of scaffolding outside the 4th story of Letterman's building, and we'll put the band on there. And we advanced it, went with the bandwidth. They're like, this is cool, this is something different. Didn't realize that the way that it was set up, there was no railings. The drum riser was set up right at the edge of the stage, and our drummer decided to tell me that he has severe stage fright and was freaking out the whole time.
He was afraid of heights. Afraid of heights.
I'm sorry.
Would you like a visual aid for this?
Yeah, let's just throw that up there, Adrian. And was basically fearing for his tech's life. You can see my staff Zach is on right there, and you can kind of see.
Did you see it? Wait, hold on. Did you get the right thing? Are you there? Are you seeing it?
Yeah, okay. That shows you they're moving into place, and you can see the drummer in the black off to the side. You can see this, but you can, even without seeing his face, you can see the look of the feeling of fear on everyone on there as they're moving this into place.
Here.
How high in the air was that?
About 30 feet in the air.
Drum tech. Staring and
concerned. There, knowing what he's walking into.
Downstage edge of the riser hanging off.
The riser, even though it's locked down, as risers do, they move slightly when you put drums on them. So this drum riser was rocking while they were doing it. So yeah, it was definitely you. So even though you can do all due diligence, advance everything, there's always surprises. You're never walking into the same scenario, especially if you want to do something special. Be prepared that you're going to have special circumstances happen, and be ready for it at all times. And know what walking into. And have fun.
Can I say one thing on that performance? Be aware that performance probably cost $300,000.
Oh yeah.
Just be aware of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Everybody's out there like, oh, that's a great idea. Like
we shut down that street. I mean, you know, Keith, that whole street was shut down. So we had to shut down that street, brought in an audience for that security for that. I mean, that wasn't just building a stage. That was like stopping, you know, Midtown Manhattan and this was also shot later in the day at like 5 or 6 p.m. So we were shutting down Midtown Manhattan at rush hour. Yeah.
We did
show.
Pharrell on the entrance to the building outside on 6th Avenue.
Here's a reference shot.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Now see his street is only like 2 lanes. I did it on 6th Avenue, which was 8 lanes of traffic, and it was nuts. Yeah. And that cost us $500,000. And that was for Pharrell. It was for Pharrell for some, it was for something for the show, but you know, he was part of it. But
he performed on the marquee, right?
Yeah, on the marquee, yeah. And that was probably $400,000. You know what I mean? And we had to get a sponsor to come in and pay. Samsung, I think, came in and sponsored some of it. But just be aware, as an artist management and label people, that things like that are very few and far between. You can shoot for the moon, but be aware that budgetary reasons are going to bring you down here, you know, based on whatever the budget is coming from Erika. If Erika's only got $20,000 she could spend for that performance, then you have to be aware of that. And I think that's another thing that unfortunately, I get stuff from a production manager who has not even spoken to the label. And that becomes an issue, and that's what takes the time. So the production manager could be speaking to the artist and say, hey, we want to do flames, we want to do the video wall, we want to do 25 dancers. Dancers cost $1,000 a piece on our show. You know, background vocals cost $500 to $800, depending on how many they are and what they're doing. Dancers are another thing that depends on what they're doing. If they're doing choreographed dance, it's one budget. If they're just standing there, if they're just extras, it's another budget. You know what I mean? So all those things, and unfortunately, at television, everything costs money. There's no way, there's nothing that happens for free. Right. So it's important for you to have that relationship with the artist and be able to discuss that, rather than having the management and the label. It becomes a fine line between being over involved and not involved enough, because sometimes you're the first person, you're the person that speaks to the artist every day. Their management and their label doesn't speak to them every day. So getting information sometimes helps. If you can speak to your artist and get some type of idea of what they want to do. That way it can be discussed with the management, it can be discussed with the label, and then all that stuff can happen. But a lot of it all starts with the artist. You know, unfortunately, some artists are very, very driven by what they want to do. And it's important for them to express themselves. So they say, I want to do this, I want this to happen, I want this to happen. And some artists are very, very strong on that side. Some artists are not. Some artists will open themselves up and they'll say, hey, what do you want to do? What do you think is going to be good? You know, and recognize that everything you do costs money. And that's the bottom line, because not only you have to pay for the artist to get there, you got to pay for the backline, you have to pay for transportation. And those are things that happen every day. Those are things that are everyday expenses. You can't get around them. Creatively, that becomes the issue when it comes to the creative side. That's where the budget can go swiftly north if you're not careful. And then the issue comes, who's paying for it, you know?
But if you take all that, you figure it all out, and somehow you manage to pull it all together, you get to do this amazing thing that gets seen by millions of people around the world. Yeah. You know, I can't count how many TV shows I've done now, but I can remember all of them. I can't remember every show I've done, but I can look back and be like, or find it on YouTube and be like, man, I remember that show. Because you're right, Jim, like some of the best shows I've ever done were television. When we talked about New York so much today, like I remember doing the final TRL show. It was a huge deal. If any of you guys were on it, because they had like every artist that had ever been on TRL come perform that night. And with Fall Out Boy, we performed on the back of a flatbed truck in Times Square. They just shut it down, and we were performing out there that night. Or, you know, the New Year's ball drop. Doing that's one of the craziest shows that you could ever do in your career. You know, and so these are perks of the job that I love, and so it really pays to like know how to interface with television and radio, not just the stage, because it's a big perk of the job. Like I said, I love doing promo because
you should enjoy it. I think that's the other thing, you know, as an artist, we talk about the artist experience, but as a production experience, you know, having done the Tonight Show or having done Seth Meyers or, you know, or whatever show, those are things that you'll always remember.
Yeah, and the relationships you
So
build
fun.
too. I mean, some of my best relationships I have Michael and everybody at the Letterman crew.
Definitely, man.
With you.
Listen,
I've done Mike's show a ton of times, man.
Maureen and Jenna at Saturday Night Live. I mean, Jenna and I still talk every couple of days. Like we're, you know, like I have lifelong relationships and friendships through TV people that I've met, which I've done a few times, you know.
Michael Ferrante from the Letterman Show is my current production manager.
I know. I know.
Go figure. And the funny thing is that when, you know, when we started working together, he's in those pictures that I just put up, and I sent them to him and I said, remember this day. And he was like, wow, that's really cool. You know, it's an interesting, and that is, it's,
I always yell at Michael. That goes without saying.
Michael and I might have yelled at each other.
And you know, that speaks to what happens with relationships, Doug. Just before we move on to your point in closing, that's the point of relationships. You never know who your production manager might end up being. Now, do you?
Yeah.
So what happens if somebody was crappy to Michael Ferrante on the Letterman Show, and now he's hiring and firing you? You didn't expect that, did you?
And if your artist is going to come to do the Roots picnic, you know, that's you have to deal with me anyway.
Right. You know, so it's just, you never know who you're going to run into and in what position in this business, because people stay in this biz for a long time. And they do, and we have a tendency to do lots of different things with lots of different people. Doug, over to you, buddy.
Sorry. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And my point kind of extends from it. And maybe, Erika, you can just back me up on this. Just one thing I wanted to stress, especially for those of you who are going to be coming into this from like the really early stages. Promo is going to be fired at you from all angles. And, you know, in the best case scenario, you're going to be working with somebody like Erika, who's going to be considering your tour routing, or one of her staff who understand that you are running on 3 hours sleep and you've done 6 shows in a row. And you know, to get up at 6 a.m. on a show day to do promo is going to be really hard for you. So having a good relationship with your label rep is fundamental, because just like Keith said earlier about having a good relationship with your local production, maybe they might give you a hand later on the day when you need a favor. Same goes for the label. You know, if you keep an open dialogue with them, you keep them informed of how the promo is going. You know, you report back and say, hey, you know, radio station visit today went well. They're stoked on how the band played, you know, blah, blah, blah. Keep them informed of how the band is doing on the road. They're going to have a better idea of how you're doing, and maybe that's going to give you an easier run on the road. Because I've been in a situation where just everything was going at you. Hey, you need to be in Berlin at 6 a.m. tomorrow. And I'm like, well, I'm 8 hours away from Berlin. How do you expect me to be there? You know, sometimes when the scenario is not as ideal, maybe you have inexperienced management or an inexperienced label rep. Ultimately, you need to remember that you're employed by the artist. So it's a fine balancing act between taking every opportunity and looking after the welfare of your artist. So maybe, Erika, you could just talk really quick about how you see that from the label side.
100%. I mean, the most important thing, you know, I certainly recognize that artists mostly make their music so they can go out and perform it live for fans. That's really where the magic happens. And if an artist is working too hard and getting, you know, if they're run down, if they're tired, if they're sick, if they're losing their voice, if they're not in a good headspace psychologically, well, then we've sort of missed the point of the whole thing. Because if they get sick, if they're run down, if they have to cancel a big TV opportunity, if they have to cancel a show because they've done too much promo and too much singing 6 days in a row, then we've missed the mark and we've done the artist a disservice. So, you know, that open communication of it's getting it to be too much. They're exhausted. They're tired. I mean, I have artists, like I know that like the girlfriend dumped him. He's heartbroken. It's a wreck. Well, maybe we shouldn't do so much promo tonight. The guy's a mess. so that open communication as a tour manager, you're there to protect your artist and make sure that they turn in the best performance that they can, that they're, the best version of humans as they can be. This is hard work. A lot of people think it's like, oh, it's so sexy, you're in all these cities and you're doing all these things. It's tiring, it's exhausting. And, so, that open communication, again, like you said, if you tell me the artist is tired, I'll jump in and say, you know what, why don't we get you some hotels this night? We'll fly you tomorrow, so you don't have to bus it overnight and be exhausted. Or, use your resources to help protect the artist. And if you just have open communication, rather than, sometimes people will choose to not reply at all because whatever's happening on the road is all bad. But if you were to just tell me and call me up and say, it's all bad, they broke up, they're sick, they're whatever. If we can really understand what's happening, then we can be more helpful and more collaborative, as opposed to just shutting down and not dealing with it. And it's hard. There's this great meme, I mean, I'm sure you've all seen it, about like being a tour manager is like riding a bicycle in hell and the bicycle's on fire, you're on fire, but you have to really like stay calm and deal with it. And that's, I think that's a really important to remember. It's not just about put the schedule on paper, get here to here to here. Like you've got your own energy and your own, there it is, your own ability is you set the tone. And if you're calm and you're cool, and it's like the duck, on the water, and it's everything's paddling underneath. But if the tour manager can set a cool, calm tone, it helps the artist psychologically, gets everybody calm at the TV show. It just that's sort of the magic juju of what great tour managers really do. I mean, a lot of it can be taught, the math of it can be taught, the schedules can be taught. None of that stuff's not rocket science, but it's helping be the psychologist, the mentor, the keeping it calm. That's an advice I give people.
If you're not on site for some of these events, do you always like to have feedback from the tour manager of how the day actually went from a promo?
Absolutely.
Just to get feedback from how it went, the good stuff, the bad stuff, was someone rude, do you like to have feedback?
100%. And, it's very rare when you're on a major label anyway, that you're going to be doing promo where there isn't someone. I mean, it might be like, I don't know, you might go to like a radio station in Memphis and the radio guy can't get there, like a secondary or a tertiary market, but we're usually there for our artists. But absolutely, because, there are certainly TV shows that are actually no longer on air, so I'm not really telling stories, but there's people at TV shows who aren't very nice, and the audio guy or wherever it is, and we need to know where those pitfalls and personality problems are so that we can properly inform our artist and say, you're going to go do this piece of promo. I'm just telling you now, the audio guy there is heinous, so brace yourself. And when we've got that communication, hate to pick on audio guys, sorry, but when that communication's open, we can do a better job by the artist. And if sometimes we've got a label rep who might, I don't know, be like a stress case or a little bit of a nutbag. And if I know that and I've had that feedback, I'll know when a certain artist is going in, it's like, oh boy, they are not going to vibe with this guy in Chicago. So maybe, maybe someone else should go, or at least, for sure, two-way communication.
That's really great. And you will encounter this in the industry. You will see people, tour managers, crew, even artists who see promo as a massive inconvenience. But ultimately, the fastest way for you to progress in the music industry as a tour manager is blowing up with your artist and hanging on their coattails and progressing quick enough to keep up with their career trajectory, because a lot of them go like this. So see it as a way for you to progress your artist's career and then your own career in kind. And I think that's a great way to wrap up today's session. It can be tough, and the schedules can be really hard to manage, especially when you're rolling in and out of New York, but it's there to help your artist's career, and your career is linked to your artist's careers. So give it the due that it deserves.
Doug, can I speak on one thing really quickly?
Absolutely.
I just noticed an email, a text from somebody asking about what's going on with COVID-19, just for our show specifically. Our show is still doing music performances every day. So all of those performances are home-based performances. So it's up to you to determine what your artist is going to do. And we're doing music performances every day, like I said. And a couple of them have been really, really great performances with the individual artists, with things going on in the background and the video wall and things, the computer wall. But just be aware that these shows are still doing music acts. And so that your artists are going to have to be aware that they're going to have to come up with the stuff by themselves. And you as a tour manager and as a production manager have to be able to work with them to get them what they need in their home or wherever, whatever environment they're going to do their performance in. And that's going to be going on for at least another, probably a month, 2 months, maybe. I know NBC is not going back to work until, I can't even say, because I don't really know. Sometime in July, probably. But, and music is still going on, performances are still going on, but that's something you're going to have to be aware of.
Yeah, it's a good
Oh,
point.
that's awesome. That's good to know that they're still going on, man. There's still work to be done, and there will be again someday. But this has been one of my favorite sessions so far. I've enjoyed talking with you guys. You were the perfect guests for this to explain sort of this whole side of doing promo for touring. So thank you so much. Thanks for everybody for listening.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Erika.
Yeah,
you.
nice job.
Thank you both.
So everybody have a great Memorial weekend. We will see you again on this Thursday. We are going to work on some healthy living physically and mentally with Fitzjoy. So we'll see
Fitzjoy
you
Helen. Woo, woo.
So that'll be fun. So that's Thursday, same time. Have a great week, everyone.
Everyone stay safe out there.
Thank
Have a
you.
great week.
All right. Bye, you guys.
Bye.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.